In courthouses all over the United States stands a statue, either atop the building or emblazoned somewhere therein, of a certain Lady Justice, which is something that dates all the way back to Greek mythology and beyond. Depending on where you see her, she might be dressed differently, but a few things remain the same. In one hand, she holds a sword. In the other, the scales of justice. But perhaps the most important feature is that of her blindfold. Why is that? Because for thousands of years, practically every advanced civilization has believed that justice is blind, or that it's unbiased. Justice doesn't care who a person is, or what they look like, or what office they hold. All that matters for Lady Justice is a just legal response, a balancing of the scales, and if necessary, swift and justified punishment. That's why she's holding that sword. Now, depending on who you ask in this country, it seems as though Lady Justice has removed her blindfold and she's stuck a pin to declare her allegiance to a certain political party. And if you look close enough, you'll see that her sword is raised and ready to strike, but the scales are completely off balance.
Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with felony violations of our national security laws, as well as participating in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. This indictment was voted by a grand jury of citizens in the Southern District of Florida. The men and women of the United States intelligence community and our armed forces dedicate their lives to protecting our nation and its people. Our laws that protect national defense information are critical to the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. Violations of those laws put our country at risk. Adherence to the rule of law is a bedrock principle of the Department of Justice, and our nation's commitment to the rule of law sets an example for the world. We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone.
That would be Special Counsel Jack Smith reading you the third indictment that President Trump has faced since he's been out of office. The first pertained to an indictment in New York where the charge was related to falsifying business records because during President Trump's campaign in 2016, there was apparently quote-unquote hush money paid to an adult film actress with whom the soon-to-be president had an alleged affair. That indictment was presented in March of this year. Then a second indictment, this being the first federal indictment in regard to the classified documents. This was presented in June of this year, but I'll come back to that one in a moment. The third indictment came a couple of weeks ago about the insurrection, and we're getting more and more information out of Georgia in regard to the fourth indictment. I don't think there's much substance to the third indictment, which relates to President Trump's actions on January 6th, 2021, because we've already had an extensive congressional investigation on the matter. There was an impeachment trial. Oh, and the J6 committee, they conveniently deleted all of their files, but that's another story for a different day. We don't have time to get into all of the J6 matters today. I do believe that there is more substance to the indictments in Georgia, which we'll talk about in the coming weeks. But thematically, I want to talk about justice and the biblical response to all of this messiness. In regard to the initial indictment, if the charges and the accusations in the case are legit, then President Trump's campaign broke New York state law, and they'll have to face consequences for that, not to mention the injustice of his infidelity. But let's talk about the second indictment, because this is the one that's had the most discussion. It's been talked about more than any of the others. The official terminology is the mishandling of classified documents. What does that mean? Well, presidential records could be anything from letters, memos, to schedules and emails, to pictures and video. Under the Presidential Records Act of 1978, the National Archives tells us any records created or received by the president as part of his constitutional, statutory, or ceremonial duties are the property of the United States government, and will be managed by NARA, the National Archives, at the end of the administration. Under this act, which applies both to presidential and vice presidential materials, the National Archives says, the official records of the president and his staff are owned by the United States, not by the president. To this point, they say, the archivist is required to take custody of these records when the president leaves office and to maintain them in a federal depository. However, after 5 years, some of the information is accessible to the public under the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. Why only some of it? Well, because certain information can be classified. Classified information is defined as information requiring protection against unauthorized disclosure in the interest of national defense and security or foreign relations of the United States pursuant to federal statute or executive order. These records are given different classifications, basically based on how damaging the divulging of the records would be. So if something is classified as top secret, let's say, it's considered by the classifying agency or whatever person classified it to be a great threat to the country if this information got out, if it was divulged. According to CNN, federal authorities have recovered more than 325 classified documents from Trump. He has voluntarily given back some materials. His lawyers turned over additional files after a subpoena, and the FBI found dozens of classified records during a court-approved search of his Mar-a-Lago home last summer. Now, this story goes back to right after President Trump left office. As I've already mentioned, the Presidential Records Act of 1978, which is a legal statute, this is something Congress passed, tells us President Trump was supposed to turn in all of his records, basically in regards to his administration. Well, he obviously didn't comply with that. And since his departure from office, President Trump has resisted their efforts to obtain all of these records. So through all this process and back and forth, President Trump was slapped with an indictment of 37 federal charges. It was 31 counts of conspiracy to obstruct justice, 5 counts having to do with concealing, corrupting, or withholding of records, and then 1 count of false statements and representations. This case, and the others, will take a long time to parse out. And, of course, Trump and his team, they're going to fight every bit of it, every step of the way. But what are we as Christians to think about it? President Trump is alleging a few things. First, that he, as president, can declassify whatever he wants. Second, that he's doing what other presidents have done. And third, that this is all a political witch hunt. He is, every single day, perpetuating the idea that this is President Biden, his administration, and the media trying to stop him from re-entering the Oval Office. But let's break some of this down. To the first point, President Obama issued an executive order in 2009 stating, "The authority to classify information originally may be exercised only by the president and the vice president, agency heads, and officials designated by the president. Information shall be declassified or downgraded by the official who authorized the original classification. If that official is still serving in the same position and has original classification authority." That means President Trump would have only had the authority to declassify these records while he was in office. Now, given these various departments' reaction to these records Trump took out the door, it's hard to tell who isn't telling the truth here. Is President Trump being dishonest about the declassifications, or are these various government agencies? Only the legal process will tell us. To the second point, President Trump is correct that he's doing what previous government employees have done. That's why the Justice Department investigated Vice President Mike Pence and President Joe Biden for the same things. In Biden's case, classified documents were found at his homes, plural, in both Delaware and Washington. And how can we forget the infamous email server that then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had at her residence, storing classified information, just, of course, susceptible to any sort of hacking or leaking. And We cannot forget how the evidence in that case with Hillary Clinton was destroyed. It was literally destroyed. That was all definite mishandling, but of course that all resulted in nothing. Which brings me to the final point, and kind of the point of this whole thing, that there is an obvious double standard, or as Trump says, a political witch hunt to destroy President Trump in an unjust system, unbalanced. That has been the case since the man was campaigning for president. There have been over 30 investigations, including over 10 now federal investigations, over almost 9 or 10 state and local investigations, and 12 congressional investigations. Over 30. Some of these have been concluded. Of course, he was impeached twice in the Democrat-controlled House, but acquitted in the Senate. Nothing that has been concluded has taken him out or destroyed him, is what seems the intent of all this. But several of these investigations persist, and you can just about bank on it. You can guarantee that they will never end. They're just going to keep coming and coming and coming. The double standard of justice is obvious, especially when you consider Trump's first impeachment. He was impeached in the House of Representatives for abuse of power, which that language doesn't exist in the impeachment clause of the U.S. Constitution. All this for pressuring Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden, which at the time was Trump's political opponent. The representatives called this abuse of power and impeached him over it. But fast forward a couple of years, President Biden is in office now and is using his own Justice Department to investigate his very likely political opponent. But of course, in Biden's case, it can't possibly be abuse of power too, right? Well, Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution says this: the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of these things: treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, in several constitutional matters, we're forced to speculate on the intent and meanings implied by the framers. Bribery is one of those terms, as well as high crimes and misdemeanors, but treason is not. Article 3, Section 3 seems to define said treason by, quote, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, talking about the United States enemies, giving aid and comfort to them. High crimes and misdemeanors seems like a redundancy, but there's clearly a distinction here. A crime is something that is legally prohibited, and a criminal is a person who breaks the law. If law breaking in high office was all the framers were concerned with, they could have just left the word misdemeanors out, but they didn't. The addition of the word misdemeanors tacks onto the impeachment qualifications instances of misbehavior or misdeeds. So personally, I believe the framers included that language to give the people's representatives the authority to remove members of high office if their behavior has been unsatisfactory to the public. In fact, this very subject has been the basis for the inception of many impeachments in U.S. history. So just to recap these three things thus far: treason, which is giving aid and comfort to our enemies against the United States; breaking the law; and misbehavior in high offices are three of the four impeachable offenses according to the Constitution. But the last one is bribery. Now let's see if we have a good example of that.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
A bribe is money or favor given or promised in order to influence the judgment or conduct of a person in a position of trust. A more general but Latin phrase would be quid pro quo. Remember that one? Which means something given or received for something else. This was the technical charge placed around Donald Trump's neck in 2019, and this was based on a transcription of his phone call with Zelensky, which was the whole phone call was about the Biden family corruption, which we're seeing more and more information on each day. President Trump was and continues to be punished for this very crime and misdemeanor, while President Biden is facing none. None. Regardless of the unfairness and the obvious targeting and the lack of just justness across the board, President Trump has broken the law and state laws and federal laws, and in this case, and in the case of the second indictment, he's not been cooperative to rectify that, which is why he's being charged with more obstruction charges. As Christians, we should be the best of legal citizens until or if some authority is demanding we be disobedient to our ultimate authority. In that sense of the case, the just thing would be for Trump to face the consequences of the injustice he's committed. But it should be the same for President Biden. Lady Justice is supposed to be blind to party affiliation, not partisan. But I'm only saying this if the allegations are true. The law states that any records pertaining to the business of the administration have to be turned over to the National Archives. That's one thing. But several people, have not followed those rules. Trump says he declassified things, but we don't know if that's true at this point. If we discover otherwise, I promise you I will alter my position, of course. However, another legal angle that they can throw at him, this is what I meant when I said earlier, the Department of Justice will have against him is that of Trump violating the Espionage Act, which is the gathering, transmitting, or losing of defense information. So, right now, there's a lot of Republicans and conservatives that are using this situation to say, we've got to move on from Trump. It's time to move on. This is a lost cause. We need to move on from Donald Trump. And to that, I would just simply ask, do you think they're not going to go after the next guy? Well, let's say Ron DeSantis becomes the Republican nominee. Do you honestly think they're not going to give him the Trump treatment? Of course they will. Therefore, we as Christians must stand for justness. Justice. The biblical prescription for government is to punish evil and reward good, to establish law and order for the good of the people. In other words, a system of justice. Trump's seeming actions in these cases are unjust, but so are the injustices being perpetrated by these various departments of justice. It seems even more obvious when you see the court dates. Isn't it odd that they've waited over 2 years to bring these indictments? Isn't it odd that these cases are so far scheduled for trial in March and May of 2024, just half a year before the election? Why does the current president have confidential documents in his possession in 2 different states? Can Biden be impeached for things he did as vice president in the Obama administration? What other forms of injustice do we see in our country? Because I'm only talking about this injustice at the top. If the scales are this unbalanced at the very top, what is stopping Lady Justice from swinging her sword at everyday common people?